Hey guys, MG from mgcovers.com. Today we're going to look at the 5 reasons you're losing money wagering on sports. And this is a detailed look at the most common mistakes made by amateurs. So let's get started. So what are the mistakes? Number 1, not having a sound and proven statistical model. We're going to later refer to this as the stat model. Number 2 mistake, wagering on too many games, and that's obvious. Number 3, placing too much emphasis on irrelevant stats or situations. Number 4, failure to factor in non-statistical angles, and this is very important. And the biggest mistake most people make when they're wagering on sports is poor money management. Okay, one of the mistakes people make is not having a superior statistic model or not having a statistical model at all. So let's first define what a stat model is. Again, that's statistical model. Stat model is just short for that. A stat model uses the most relevant stats that pertains to that sport that will predict a line that is superior to the general public's line. Now, examples of poor stat models. A lot of people do this. They'll use win-loss record. Team A is 12-5. Team B is 7-8. Therefore, Team A will defeat Team B. Another mistake people use, they use year-long averages for any stats. And what they should be doing is they should be using the most recent stats. Okay? How a team played in September is totally irrelevant to how that team will perform in December. It just is. A better model, for example, football, would be using the last 4 games in the NFL. In hockey and baseball, I only use stats from the last 10 games. In college basketball, I only use stats from the last 5 games. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example of the very first stage of creating a stat model. So again, we need to come up with a way to more accurately predict if a team's going to win the game, lose the game, and by how much. So what I did was I just used this example. I don't use this, but I just wanted to give you an example, even though it's pretty good. We're going to look at time of possession for NFL. And what you see broken down here is the entire regular season time of possession per game averages for the entire year. So if you look at the team that had the best time of possession average for the entire NFL season were the Baltimore Ravens. They had 10 wins. Philadelphia was next, had 9 wins. Chicago 12, New Orleans 13, and finally Dallas 10. Now what's interesting about the top 5 teams that I just mentioned, those were all playoff teams. And now on our next slide, we're going to do just the opposite. We're going to look at teams that had the worst time of possession averages in the NFL this past season. Number 28 was Denver, and notice they only had 6 wins. Giants had 5 wins, Miami 7 wins, Cincinnati 6 wins, and ironically, Arizona, which was the worst team in the NFL this year, also had the worst time of possession average in the NFL. Now, that's just a place to start. Now, what you could do in order to enhance this even more, you're going to have to go back and do a lot of testing. Let's say you would go back to week 10 and you would look at the lines for that game, and then you would back up average time of possession stats for that team, compare them against the other team they're playing, and see who won the game, see if the time of possession gave you an edge. And of course, time of possession is just an offensive stat. You would need to figure out a way to incorporate a defensive stat, and then maybe you could merge those two together, create a power ranking, and then that's how you would create your stat model. Again, just an example. Mistake number 2 is playing way too many games. And this is a big one because, again, most people played way too many games. And what I did, I just backed up a week of hockey for me just so you can see about average of what I would play. Now, January 14th, I played 1 game, but there were actually 6 total games on the card. Next night, January 15th, there were 10 games, only handicap 1. January 16th, that was 1 out of 5. January 17th, 1 out of 7. January 18th, 3 out of 7. And we lost those. And if you look at the very next day, that was a Saturday, we only handicapped 2 out of 11 games and won both of those. Now, the point of this is, if you look there for the whole week of hockey, there were a total of 46 games, yet I only wagered on 9 of those, which comes out to about 19%. Now, if you back up to the previous mistake, the stat model you use should eliminate a lot of games. so that you're only down to a very small amount of games that you have an edge on. Okay, mistake number 3, placing too much emphasis on irrelevant stats. And this is a fun one. And I don't know why people put stock into these, but you see them everywhere, especially any kind of wagering site. You'll see them, like the first one there. It says Rams are, I use the stats for the upcoming Super Bowl. Rams are 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games overall. Again, that's not a bad stat. And this next one, though, really dumb. Patriots are 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games after accumulating more than 150 yards rushing in the previous game. It's just totally irrelevant. I mean, it has no bearing on the game at all. It's just a dumb stat. And over here on the right, I used, I think this is a basketball game. Yeah, Tennessee was playing Vanderbilt, I think. This is a good one. You look at the third one there. Under is 7-0 in Commodore's last 8 games versus a team with a winning percentage above 600. Again, it's just a dumb stat. The last one, over, is 4-1 in Volunteers' last 5 road games with a team with a home winning percentage of greater than 600. Again, and the reason these sites put these on there is basically to confuse you, to put doubt in your head, and then, once you have that, there's no way to, accurately, make a really good wager. On to mistake number 4. Failure to factor in non-statistical angles. Now, this is really interesting. And let's take a look at, this is a box score from this past week. Cleveland was playing Boston. Boston was favored to win by 15. So let's say you handicap this game and you saw Boston was going to win by 20. So you have some value there. That was your stat model. You said Boston was going to win by 20, but you found out that Boston is playing without 2 of its starter. How much does that affect the line? Do you factor that in? And again, I can't really tell you the answer other than that you have to factor this in one way or the other. Now, one thing you can do, and the most common thing to do when you've used your stat model to predict a game and you have some kind of nuance or situation that comes up like this, to be safe, just don't play the game. If you look over here, this is an interesting game. This was San Jose, Washington. And San Jose, I actually had, I can't remember who I had handicapped in this game. But San Jose, I know what it was. I didn't have anyone handicapped in this game. I didn't wager on this one. San Jose was playing its 3rd away game in 4 days. So again, this isn't really related to stats, but more to fatigue. So what happens to teams in the NHL that are tired? They play sloppy defense, and you can see that this game went over. Our next line to look at is the New York Mets. This is their, they were 77-85 last year in Major League Baseball. Not a great season. Although they had a great winning record on the road. You can look there, they were 40-41, so they're almost 500 on the road. Now what that means is, again, it sort of is a stat, but not really, more of a situation. So when they were on the road, if you figure this out early on, you could probably get a lot of value playing the Mets when they were on the road. And finally, mistake number 5, poor money management. Now, the first thing you need to do is determine the amount of your bankroll. What do you have total that you're willing to invest in sports? Not mortgage money, not rent money, not 401k money. Well, it could be, but what do you have that you're willing to risk? Or you might want to say what you're willing to lose. And next, you only wager a max of 5%, which is 1 unit of your bankroll per play or per game. There's no such thing as 2-star, 3-star, megastar play. You wager the same unit for every single play. If you got 5 plays, you're going to wager exactly 1 unit for each of those plays. So to give an example, in order to wager $100 per play, you must have a bankroll of $2,000. How do you determine that? Simple. 2,000 times 5% is $100. To wager $1,000 per play, you must have a bankroll of $20,000. And finally, after each win or loss, reconciliate your bankroll and adjust your unit size. And this is very important. And some of you might already know this is basically what we call compound interest, but using sports handicapping in another way. If your bankroll is $500 and you win 4 wagers at $25 a unit, your bankroll is now $600 and your new unit size will be 30. And same concept applies after you take a loss. Never, never, never double down or bet more than 1 unit per play. Example, and people do this even though it's wrong. You lose $1,500 during the week on football, then you play $1,500 on Monday night to break even. Don't do it. So guys, if you like the video, like and subscribe, and also check out our site, mgcovers.com, for more information on handicapping and also some free plays.